NFL playoffs. So we have Chargers, Texans, Steelers, Ravens, Broncos, Bills, Packers, Eagles, Commanders, Bucks, Vikings, Rams. The question on the screen is who will be the surprise team in the NFL playoffs? But Josh, I'll let you take this in whatever direction you want.
So I was explaining a little bit of this to you before the show, but I'll just clarify what it means. Like, I feel like most people in the NFC are going to be picking the Eagles or the Lions, and most people in the AFC are going to be going with the Ravens or the Bills or the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl and win it. So my brain goes to, well, what about some of those teams people aren't really talking about? Who could be that team that kind of comes out of nowhere? Like, go back to Super Bowl 56. I don't know many people who predicted it to be Bengals Rams. Like,
Yeah.
so that's what I mean. Or like back in Super Bowl 47, I don't know anybody predicted it to be Ravens 49ers.
Well, that was a long time ago. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I know
Okay,
Baltimore had that historic run. Remember, they beat New England in the AFC Championship game. Basically, got Joe Flacco paid.
right. I'm just that was just one of the first examples that came to mind to emphasize my point.
I'm gonna answer it like the way that I interpreted the question on the screen, which is who could potentially make a Super Bowl run? Not necessarily get there. Maybe the AFC Championship game or the NFC Championship game that not a lot of people expect. I really think, to be honest with you, there's only one real answer here, and it's in
Okay,
the AFC, and it's the Chargers. Like,
I like it.
they're favored by 2.5 against Houston in Houston. It's very rare that a road team is favored in the playoffs. And the way
They're
Houston's
one
in,
of two teams that are road favorites this week. It's
the other
them
one I
and
don't get at all. I think the Rams should be favored over the Vikings. I don't understand. I get Minnesota was 14-3. I don't know. It's really a pick 'em line. I kind of favor the Rams in that game myself.
okay.
Um, but so with the Chargers, Houston, they have fallen off a cliff offensively really the last month. And so, I like the Chargers to go in there and win. And by my projections, I think Baltimore is going to beat Pittsburgh, and I think Buffalo is going to beat Denver. So that would set up uh, Baltimore going to Buffalo and the Chargers then going to Kansas City. And I think if there is one team not named Buffalo and not named Baltimore that's built to go beat Kansas City, it's Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. So, out of especially in the AFC, out of all the top teams not being named, I think it's the Chargers. In the NFC, if you want to take one, maybe it's the Rams. I don't trust Sam Darnold at this point in Minnesota. I think Philadelphia is going to be Green Bay, obviously. I do think Tampa is going to be Washington. And so that would set up the winner of the Rams Vikings game to go to Detroit. And I think either of those two teams could pull off an upset against the Lions, but I would not predict it. So, out of all the plausible paths, is all I'm saying, I think the Chargers are the best plausible path to be that surprise team.
Okay. I I definitely like where your head's at. I've got two in the NFC. I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and I've got the LA Rams.
Okay.
So with Tampa Bay, they lost Chris Godwin, but as long as Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans, he's going to. It seems like he's going to ball out.
They're
He's
they're gonna put up points, but doesn't it seem like ever since that Charger game, like even against the Saints, like I kind of took that as like, wow, they're not blowing the Saints out. Like, are they really as good as maybe we all think they are?
and you do make a valid point, but it just seems like this Tampa team has a bit of swagger to it that almost reminds me of when they won the Super Bowl just a few years ago. Sure, they don't have the same caliber of defense necessarily, and it's obviously not Brady at the controls. I get it. But you look at that team and this team, they kind of have that same swagger to them. That maybe that's just me looking at something that's not really there, but that's just how it looks to me.
Well, to your point, they did beat Detroit in Detroit this year, and they did beat Philly, and they are the only team obviously beat both the NFC favorites. I will push back on that though and say obviously that Philadelphia game was no AJ Brown, no Devontae Smith. It was a different Eagles team that was
Sure.
for a game. So I think that Philadelphia has obviously struggled the last couple times they play against Tampa. If Philadelphia gets by Green Bay the way I think we will, and if Tampa gets by the Commanders the way I think that they will, it does make me a little bit nervous knowing Tampa has our number, though they will not have Chris Godwin, which I think is a big factor for our defense specifically, because then we can sort of, double team Mike Evans and force them to go elsewhere. I think that Tampa going to Philly to me is a different story than Philly going to Tampa.
I agree with you there. And then going to the Rams, like Matthew Stafford has once again found the fountain of youth and he's playing really well, I think anyway.
I will say this. It sort of feels like if the Rams get past the Vikings, which again, that's a rematch from week 8. I think the Vikings will play better than what they did against Detroit, though I still don't know if it's going to lead to a victory. If Stafford goes back to Detroit again, doesn't it sort of feel like okay, you've been back there 3 times now? It's like not reminiscent. You took them to overtime week 1. To me, it feels like that would be the Rams' time to get them.
Yeah, I agree. Um, and it feels like the Rams are putting it together defensively now. Jared Verse has been fantastic for them.
You can make a
If,
case easily alongside Quinyon Mitchell, defensive rookie of the year.
oh yeah, for sure. And as long as they have Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup on the outside, they are dangerous. So I would I think I would give the Buccaneers the slight edge over the Rams in terms of being that surprise team in the NFC because they match up really well with the Eagles, if that is in fact the matchup. And I agree with you about the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I think Kansas City should still be the favorite to win it all, even over my Eagles in the AFC. See, especially because I think until someone beats them, I can't pick against them. NFC, I think it really has set up like it's going to be Philly at Detroit. It's going to come down to who has the ball last. That's the way it sort of feels to me.
I think the fact that it's in Detroit could give the Lions the edge. I don't think the crowd noise will scare the Eagles too much because they play their home games in Philly. But at the same time, it it would be a different environment. If
That's going to be a bonkers environment. I think again though, Philadelphia's ability to be so multiple offensively, and the fact the Eagles have an equal, if not better, offensive and defensive line as Detroit. That's something Detroit hasn't been able to face all year.
I think what would for me what would tip the scale in the advantage of Philly is if they Detroit cannot get David Montgomery back. If it comes down to just Jameer Gibbs versus Saquon Barkley, I give the edge to Saquon.